And welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to GeekWatch, a subsidiary of the monastery, the open bar of the internet. I am your one and only gaming monk, better known as Mildra, and today I have 1, 2, 3 good brothers. Ha 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 ha. We have our resident cosplayer and man who should not be around folding chairs, good brother Slick Rick.
I would agree with you, however, Edge and Christian have given me their blessing.
You're not even Canadian. We have...
Who said anything about Canadian? I just used the chair right.
Yeah. We have the man guiding you through all of your VTubers and your manga dubs. Good brother John.
Yes, watch us suffer, ladies and gentlemen. This is gonna hurt!
And the man of 1,000 runes, the CEO of Zadari Enterprises, and the bane of my fucking existence, good brother Xanatrix.
Hello. Zadari Enterprises would like to remind you that on the eve of the 9th anniversary of Kamen Rider Ghost, the monastery killed Kamen Rider Ghost.
How could you kill something if it's already dead?
How do you kill that which has no life?
Simple, you forget it exists.
Oh, then we're already doing a bad job because we're remembering it.
Yeah, now...
Oh, we're not remembering it. We're making it better. We have the technology, John.
Yes. Now, this particular one has been on my list for about 2 years. It has been sitting there, taunting me, going, you know, you can't run away from me forever. You can't. You cannot keep putting me off for eternity after all the other questionable Kamen Riders and Super Sentais that you've reconstructed. You're gonna have to do it eventually. Phrasing. And I was like, you know what? Fuck it. This has been kicked down the road for the longest time. I briefly touched on when we did our rankings episode on Heisei Kamen Rider. So now is as good a time as any to grab that band-aid and rip it off after 2 years. Because as it shows, we are giving Kamen Rider Ghost the Reconstruction treatment. How appropriate to do it on the eve of spooky season.
And the eve of its 9th anniversary, since October 4th will be the 9th year since it,
Which means, unfortunately, there's going to be a V-Cinema or something like it in a year's time, because you know how this works.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, it already did get a cameo. It already did a crossover with Saber, so...
It did too.
Yeah, but you know how it is. Rule of five never fails.
The reason I bring up the eve of the 9th anniversary, though, is that because in Buddhism and other such religions, 9 is a number of completeness, of wholeness.
That's why I'm surprised they haven't already done anything yet.
I think it's because it's a bigger deal when it's a 5th or 10th or multiple of 5 anniversary kind of thing.
Yep.
10th anniversaries tend to be the bigger thing for Toku. How many Sentai series have gotten 10th anniversary specials?
Yeah.
Deca Ranger.
Kaku Ranger,
Mega
that was
Ranger,
a
Go Ranger.
Deck Ranger, Kaku Ranger, Hurricaneger. And then
Um,
Kaku had its 30, but that was glorious.
And
that's not why we're here.
and technically Kyoryuger got a 100 years later episode.
Okay.
Hey, it still fucking counts.
I hate to admit it, but he's kind of
I
right.
am technically correct. The best kind of correct.
Yeah, but given the subject matter, in terms of the many problems, John, I will let you handle the preamble on this.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, yes, Kamen Rider Ghost first aired back on October 4th, 2015, as Ann had pointed out earlier. Produced by Kazuhiro Takahashi, written by 3 different writers, Takara Fukuda, Keiichi Hasegawa, and Nobuhiro Mori, with composer Go Sakabe. This series has become infamous during what we have called the dark year of Toku, as this aired alongside everyone's favorite Sentai series, Ninja. And yes, I am putting that up in drastic air quotes.
The real question now becomes, which was worse?
I'm not
The
playing...
fact that we're able to actually reconstruct this and not Ninja should answer your question.
And let me put my foot down on this right now. Ninja will not ever get a reconstruction episode.
There's no reconstruction in that. You nuke it and try something different.
Those leftovers already went bad.
Exactly. Now, as for the story, as if anyone who hasn't seen the series hasn't heard this a million fucking times, thanks to its preamble. On his 18th birthday, Takeru Tenkuji was basically killed off by a couple of rampaging Ganma, and yet somehow he miraculously was revived and given the Ghost Driver with the goal mission being to collect the 15 ghost icons based on the 15 historical figures within a time limit of 99 days, which also will help him grant him any wish he desires.
And
Meanwhile, he has to face off against the Ganma as they seek the icons for their own nefarious purposes.
yeah, and the reason why we make that gag is that preamble is given every single episode, even when it doesn't fit the episode in question or doesn't fit the point in the story.
Just go look at the tweet I just posted about not hearing the same opening 50 fucking times.
It's to the point where even reciting that opening is enough to get Toku fans triggered.
Yeah.
Go watch the end of Fuck Harmony Gold for how I made both Monk and John try to mute me.
I see this.
He's
I
not
see someone
wrong,
wants to die
folks.
today.
If you kill me today, then I actually get to say the opening as myself, and it'll be your own fault.
But this was a series that had as bad as things went, and as boring as things went, because this was definitely boring with a capital B. We over the years have learned that there were a lot of things writing against it. You obviously have the fact that it's trying to follow up Thrive, so you have the jumping after Weekless situation.
Not as strong as other seasons, but I definitely wouldn't disagree.
Yeah, you have the fact that right around the same time as we mentioned when we did the Heisei ranking episode, Amazon wanted a writer series, especially after they were given the pitch for what would become Amazon's. And a lot of Toei's A team was working on that series. And the B team was relegated to working on Ghost. In addition to all of that, there was a lot of churn. A lot of writers, producers, and the like coming in for a cup of coffee and then leaving. And one of the movies was handled by somebody who had never done anything remotely in the ballpark of Toku before. Like their only other major writing credit was a rom-com movie, which is about as ridiculous as having somebody who's only done slice of life anime, and then you give them one of the biggest of the seinen 4 pillars of heaven and watch what happens. No, I'm not letting that go.
Or, just as ridiculous as an author who had only ever worked on Boys Love being given a mecha show.
I think
For those who don't understand that, go watch Gundam Wing again. Tell me they're not all fucking gay.
Oh, I was making that joke back when it was aired in the 90s.
Yeah,
Mhm.
we ended up talking about that years ago during the Toonami episode.
But yeah, like, to give you an example of how weird things were, I mentioned Takaro Fukuda, who is basically the main writer because he was throughout the entire series for the most part. This was his first ever Kamen Rider series. Now, fair being fair, this is not new territory for him because he had previously been a secondary writer for a couple of Ultraman series. But this was his first Toei series.
Which Ultra series was he working on?
Max
he
and
was second-
7X.
Ultra 7X and Ultraman Max. Yeah, it was a secondary writer.
Okay, that kind of explains something because I've seen Max and.
Well,
Anybody
again,
who's seen our buddy Easy Writer's review of Ultra 7X knows how that turned out.
Yeah. Again, secondary writer, which means which is kind of like being the second unit director. Your job is more in keeping things consistent rather than being the primary creative force.
Yeah, whereas the guys who were pulled in as secondary writers, both Keiichi Hasegawa and Nobuhiro Mori, had been secondary writers on multiple Kamen Rider shows.
Mm-hmm. But a lot of the other producers were significantly less experienced. And that obviously ends up creating a whole lot of problems. Yes, there was also the fact that it had to do that big deal about the 45th anniversary of the franchise, because remember, Rule of 5. There was a bit of regression with the series because it was the first time that stock footage transformation had been used in quite a while, and I look at that as more of a budget cut issue.
When was the last time in Kamen Rider that they used stock footage before that?
Like for stock footage transformation, that was something that was mainly used during the Showa era.
Yeah.
I'd say the last time that it was used would probably be Ryuki. Because by the time Phase comes around, they start experimenting with transformation sequences with different camera angles.
Mm-hmm. Like, I don't know if you could fully say that about Ryuki for the most part. 'Cause I think like the only ones they had was like at the very beginning.
They were
But
still
even-
using a dedicated camera angle to the transformation,
Okay, that I'll give you.
which is why I'm counting that. And the other thing is, if you guys want a real trip, you can always watch clips of the Indonesian dub.
I'd rather not.
Yeah, seeing some of the attempts at English dubs for different Rider series is interesting, if somewhat painful. But
Yeah, I could speak from experience because we back on the old back on the old Ranger recap days, we watched an English, the Indonesian English dub episode of Kamen Rider Forze, and oh god, my ears.
mhm.
I don't want to watch it because Forza. Oh, you don't do that with my boy.
But-
They did, and it hurts.
But 2015 is and we talked about this before we went live. Is considered by a lot of people the dark year of a lot of Toku. I'm not sure what Ultraman was doing around this time, but
I don't even think they were airing. Let me double check.
I think Ultraman was still dealing with legal bullshit around this time.
What year was it? 2000.
2015. Ultraman X.
Yeah.
Okay, that
Oh yeah, it was X.
X was actually pretty good. So I would say X was doing decent.
So Ultra. Then again,
It was also trying to get its foot back in the back on the groove onto what would be the new generation. So
yeah. So X was in, I guess you could say, a rebuilding period. Kamen Rider,
Well-
not Kamen Rider, but Ultraman, you could say, was in a rebuilding period, and with Super Sentai and Kamen Rider, you had the 1-2 punch of Nin Ninja, as mentioned before, and this.
for 15 episodes, 15 weeks.
Mhm.
I would argue that you can't always make the comparison between Ultraman and Toei though, because Tsubudaya tends to do.
They
Their
have a
own-
better sense of quality control.
I'm more referring to the state of Toku in 2015.
Yeah, it's
Mm.
more of a generalization thing than it is a specifics.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I would like to point out that while we didn't get a live Toku of Garo the animation was airing in 2014 and 2015.
Mhm.
Oh yeah, that's
And
good.
most people don't exactly favor the animes, so that's
Uh,
not exactly.
They're
high
really
praise.
good though.
Oh yeah.
They are good, but it's one of those things where Garo's big identity is having this all-star lineup of Toku production.
I know. I just think that Garo in general has never really just said it's only going to be Toku. They always seem to experiment with things outside of Toku, and it's I think just as usual, we could take Garo, put it in the bubble, put it to the side.
Mhm.
Pretty much.
Doesn't matter what it is. Garo gets its bubble, goes to the side because Garo is a precious baby, and anybody who tries to attack it, I will skin you alive.
But with
Folks, I have seen it. I've seen his shed.
Moving
where he has
on.
all the-
yeah, moving right along. When it comes to Ghost, even with all the stuff writing against it, there is still the problem of you have characters that end up going through their arcs way too quickly. You have certain characters that do not have any arcs. You have one character who's considered the breakout, but only because they had a long-term story arc. And you have you have the unholy combination of slow direction and trying to add too much. Which, all of those things are the reason why I put Ghost as F when we did that ranking setup, just because of the sheer amount of stuff working against it and the sheer amount of questionable decisions. Which ends up being frustrating because the concepts that Ghost is going with, when it comes to the eyes, when it comes to the forms being based on historical figures, those are the kind of things that I'd be all for. And seeing those kind of things, and even some of the use of CG and some of the fight scenes were very well done in Ghost. It's a case where you have the whole being less than the sum of its parts.
It's a reverse Gestalt.
Exactly. And for context, to give an idea of how this still is the fault of the series and its team versus the aspects against it, look at shows like Hibiki, Decade, hell, even in America, look at Power Rangers RPM. They had a whole bunch of shit against them, and yet they still managed to turn out stuff that a lot of people do love. Even if I'm not a big fan of Decade, I respect the people who like it, and I see the potential in it. But, like, you look at RPM, it was a show that was being canceled. It had a very minuscule budget. It had a director who got thrown to it had its head producer getting thrown into the fire with no experience in Power Rangers, working on a series that was almost certainly going to be impossible to adapt, and yet he still turned out a beloved classic. Even if they had to switch producers halfway through, point still stands.
That and there's a part of me that still wants to be a fly on the wall when he saw the Go Andra footage for the first time, given his pitch.
Yeah, Kara has showed us what his original reaction was to that, and I would have just loved to have heard that in person.
But the reason, even though there's plenty of things working against it, the reason why I'm less inclined to give Ghost a pass for the things working against it is because several of the mistakes that were shown in the final product were mistakes of their own doing. Budget cuts cannot be blamed for things like slow pacing, for example. That is something that you're doing by your own hand. And because of that, there are some series that have been considered divisive, and there are some series that may be considered overrated or overhated. But when it comes to Ghost, I know that some people try to say that there's never been a proper explanation as to why the hate. There has been, and while I do think some of the hate could get a little bit overblown, considering the context and the point in time, it's completely understandable. And I think what's even more telling is when it comes to cameos and throwbacks and the like, there's plenty of that in Kamen Rider, but Ghost has gotten the least of that. It's like even the production team wants to do their absolute best to forget it existed. Yeah.
The only series that has had appearances from Ghost outside of the massive crossovers where everybody has to be involved was Kamen Rider Saber, which was written by mostly the same people.
Mm-hmm.
And
in fact, I think that was their attempt to try to fix Ghost.
Fixing it, but also I think it was also because one of the key things they were trying to do, which at least we saw in the Spectre one, they had one of the characters already on contract for the Sentai at the time, so it was easy for them to actually get her in.
Yeah. And of course, some of the problems stem as early as the opening theme song.
Yeah, which we'll get to that in a minute. But with all of that writing against it, let us have a go. So, since you brought that up, that is one of the first things I do want to tackle. Now, the scoring within the actual episodes, I don't mind. It does what it needs to do.
They didn't have a lot of insert songs, in fact, almost.
And I'd imagine that's due to budget reasons. But when it comes to the opening, And therefore we are. I understand lyrically that that the full version does tie into the theming of the series, but and I said this back then, and John can vouch for me on this. It sounded like the opening you would hear in one of the later seasons of Naruto when they were still in filler hell. And I'm not saying that just because orange.
And also, I would also say it sounds a lot like a lot of shoujo anime openings.
Which
very downplayed, very low key, not a lot of energy to it. It was just it's as boring as the show is.
Which when you contrast that with the openings you got the year before and the year after, that ends up being a problem that has to be addressed, because the year before we get Surprise Drive, which is fucking great.
Yeah.
The year after we get Excite, which is fucking great.
And then right in the middle, there's this shit in the sandwich.
So
I don't think it's so much shit as it's just the same issue that most people have with Ghost, which is that it's boring.
Yeah.
Like it's bland rather than shit. If it were shit, it would actually hurt your ears. It's an okay song if you don't attach it to Kamen Rider Ghost. I just, when you guys mentioned that the opening was the descriptors you were giving, I'm like, do I even remember the opening of Ghost? And the answer was no, I don't. I actually had to just go look it up and listen to it again to remind myself as to why those descriptors are given. I'm like, yeah, I can see those descriptors of it being filler hell Naruto or shoujo anime. I can see that.
Like the other comparison I would do, and to an extent, I think you all know where I'm coming from with this. During the McMahon era, the late McMahon era, a women's match during a taping of Raw or WWE. At least when it was good.
And the only interesting thing about the song and anything is if you've ever seen the band.
Oh,
how
those
they
fucking
look.
pompadours.
Yeah,
they're a bunch of Yankees.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty good. Like the song itself, detach it from Ghost. It's a good song.
Mm-hmm.
It's enjoyable. It's a bop. You can nod your head to it. It's not like a bop that's going to be a banger that defines the entire thing, but it's a good song.
Yeah.
It's not a great song.
The thing is, my philosophy when it comes to opening themes for works, especially any action
Impact.
associated work, is there needs to be an impact within the first 2 seconds.
Yes,
And
impact.
If you want a good example of this kind of thing, look at the way entrance themes for wrestlers have evolved.
Monk, I'm gonna give you a counter offer here.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to take the comparison of Ghost here and its opening not having the biggest impact and thus being forgetful in context of Ghost, but being an okay song. And I'm going to take a song that most people would not expect to be one of those impactful songs for something like this, that absolutely was, and is stuck in everybody's head to this day. Beverly, be the one. Fuck you. Kamen Rider Build's opening is a masterpiece.
Oh, I'm not going to disagree with that, but I'm also I will disagree with the fact that it has an impact.
Well, no, what I'm saying is people wouldn't expect it to have the type of impact Kamen Rider needs, because it's a pop song.
I would also still disagree with that, because it's like you said, it has to have an impact within those first 2 seconds. As soon as you hear those opening chords, you know something's about to go down. It is powerful right out the gate.
That, and it's a lot of times it's a natural progression to those chords. Now the bigger it's for that reason that I think that opening, even though we enjoy it in isolation, I think that would have to be redone. And the approach to redoing it, I think, would ultimately depend on the kind of tone that we go with. I think from what I recall, early on, one of the goals was to do something leaning more into the supernatural, because the predecessor was very much on the technological end of things with Drive.
Yes. Drive was also exceptionally dark.
Mhm.
Even with its brightest moments. The whole, the entire opening explanation is basically a love letter to film noir detective movies.
Mhm.
Like the first of the opening regarding all the roid nudes and everything.
Mhm.
Like, and even itself, it was basic. When you look at it, it was maybe not detective style, but it was a police procedural in a way, and especially like taking an influence from the West. And no matter how much you want to deny it, police procedurals usually get into some dark and touchy matters.
Well, and police procedurals were an evolution from detective film noir. Like, when people think police procedurals, they tend to think of, things like In the Heat of the Night and stuff.
Mhm.
Which you can see the evolution from noir. So the fact that Shinosuke, and of course, his story about his first encounter with everything.
Mhm.
Man, Shinosuke gets the shit end of the stick a lot of the time in Drive when you think about it.
You're not wrong.
But the impact of that technological noir, and that's what I'm going to call it, a technological noir, definitely needed some sort of juxtaposition.
But
A palate cleanser.
Toei has a very, very bad habit of following up a very serious show with a ridiculously silly show. What Des Shinta has called the Car Ranger effect.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I can see that.
And when it comes to it, the approach that the particular issue here is that you have to is, as we often say, you've got to commit. And when it comes to this, trying to do the supernatural, trying to deal with the story of things tied to death and impermanence, which is what's hinted at a few times, is contradictory to doing lighthearted. I mean, look, if you need an example of that, look at what happened with Star Trek Insurrection.
Yeah.
Also, thank you, Mario, for resubbing on YouTube. I do appreciate that.
The big thing here is that we can still lean into the supernatural thing rather than the Ganma being extra dimensional. They really are just from the world of the dead.
Mhm.
And like I was saying earlier before we started, we could probably keep the palace intrigue angle as the primary driver for why things are happening poorly.
Yeah.
Why the world of the dead is spilling over back into the world of the living.
So
why Edith needs to come to the world and choose someone to use the ghost driver to try and help reestablish the boundary between the worlds or whatever.
Yeah. Now, given that, I think the one of the early things we need to establish is in regard to Takeru Tenkuji, and I'd say I know some people look at him personality wise as a cinnamon roll, but they
tried to make a sunshine boy and they went too far.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The pendulum can swing too far both ways. Especially the
we
running
can-
meme about him hugging people to try and make everything okay.
Yeah. No, I think we can still make him a sunshine boy. I still think that that's central to what they're trying to do with him and what we should be trying to do with him. Seeing the brighter side of things, making the world a better place. And
Yeah.
I think that can tie into the spiritualism aspect because he is still a member of that temple. I mean, the temple's named after his fucking family, for fuck's sake.
Yeah.
Tenkuji Temple. Yeah, he's already spiritual. It's a Shinto or Buddhist temple. It's mostly Buddhist from what we see in the show. The idea of making death not so scary definitely plays into Takeru being a sunshine boy.
Mhm.
And so rather than him being this eternal optimist that's too bright for mortal eyes and thus making him a one-dimensional character. That's what it does. By flanderizing him so highly, he becomes one-dimensional, and as YGM points out, boring and bland.
Mhm.
One of the issues the show has. You make it so that he understands death is scary. He lost his dad when he was young. He lost a lot of people. He's been raised at a temple by a monk that is his best friend and also, or one of his best friends, but also not his family.
Mhm.
But he knows that death is not the end, at least according to the tenets of his religion. Death is just a step back into the cycle of rebirth, of samsara. And so in making it so that death is not so scary would be a better motivator for why Takeru tries to be positive.
Yeah.
He understands that life and death are two sides of the same thing, and that because of that, looking on the brighter side of life so that you can enjoy it and do good things while living, rather than succumbing to the darkness and either not acting or acting negatively, would fit his sunshine boy persona.
Mhm. Now, when it comes to the supporting cast, like I said, I'm very keen on keeping supporting casts small. We've seen problems that happen when you have a bunch of supporting characters in a given work, even outside of Toku. And of course, all of us are big fans of Riku Sanjo, and he very much doesn't like large casts,
Yeah.
which is.
Um.
But when it comes to Akari, I'm perfectly fine with having her as a kind of audience surrogate. Someone who has a very scientific attitude, who starts to have a better understanding of the supernatural.
Mm-hmm.
That and I'm still keeping that whole possessed by Beethoven thing because that was funny as hell.
That makes perfect sense. I think that when it comes to our allied characters, we only need two. Both Shibuya and Narita being named after areas of Japan for no reason other than because that's a trope in almost all of Japanese media. They are only really there to be, like, do you want to know what my comparison Onari, Shibuya, and Narita were when I was watching Ghost?
What?
Discount Boss Nuke and Ucha from Mazinger Z. Discount versions of good joke characters, which is why they weren't that good.
Yeah.
The Shibuya and Narita can basically just be cut out because as monks in training, they're just going to be background characters to begin with. They don't need names. They can just be there, then show up like as extras in the background while training at Daitenkuji. And maybe they interact like all extras do once in a couple episodes.
Mm-hmm.
Onari, on the other hand, he needs a change. I know that you want to change him, and I know that we also talked about what changes could be added to him, guys.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
but he does need to exist because he's Takeru's surrogate guardian at this point, because Takeru lost his dad so young.
Mhm.
So he's both friend, but, mentor figure. The ideas I had, Monk, and feel free to tweak them since it's your shtick. Onari still has some overreactions, because he overreacted to everything. But in this case, I think his overreactions would be specific to the supernatural, because in Buddhism, spirits that linger are seen as unclean. And so his overreaction would be that the unclean spirits are there, and he's going to immediately try to give them peace and let them go back into the cycle. But he's going to be more serious about how he's been teaching Takeru regarding Buddhism and the spiritualism, and how, one day you'll see your dad again. He may not be the same as he was, but he will be here again.
Mhm.
I also think that Onari should actually have enough actual spiritual power that while he can't defeat Ganma, he can absolutely repel them and protect others from them, because he is that spiritual of a monk.
Absolutely. And I also think, to play into the dichotomy between Onari and Akari, as the series goes on, build a thing where the two of them actually start working together. Now that she's becoming more accepting of the supernatural, he can work with her to build weapons to help fend off the Ganma even more.
Mhm.
Again, never truly fully defeating them, but at least keeping them safe and protecting them.
Yeah.
If there's one thing I would like to get rid of his character, this was something I remember early on, was he was like, I'm fine with him being accepting of doing things from the religious or the spiritual aspect. However, this is what I know from personal accounts. I would say he almost felt like he was a xenophobe to anything technological in terms of usage at the very.
You're talking about he felt like a Luddite.
Yeah,
That
I would
I
say,
think is excessive.
That
is totally against it, because that I will say this from friends. I had teachers who actually spent time at a couple monasteries, both Buddhism and Shinto. That thing's this that's totally while they had restrictions and were against it, yes, but they weren't as bad as a warrior. I would say he needs to be a bit more accepting of it early on, not to a point where there's no point of giving him a growth arc, but the negative reactions he had early on, get rid of them.
The negative overreactions. Like I said, we're getting rid of all his overreactions, besides an obsession with how the dead lingering is a form of uncleanliness. Because his slight obsession with cleaning, it could be seen as an extension of Buddhism sees the dead not properly going into the cycle as unclean.
And I don't see a problem with that.
Yeah, and so when the Ganma are revealed, they're going to be monsters at first, and he's going to be like, "What are these monsters? Keep away!" And he's gonna fend them off, and it's just going to be like, "Well, my faith in Buddha and how we do things protected us." When he finds out later that they're actually ghosts, they're from the land of the dead, he's going to have a more hardline stance against the Ganma, because now he knows that they are the dead not properly going through the cycle as Buddha intends, and that's not good. So I think Onari at that point would encourage Takeru and his mission. Which let's get into Edith now.
Actually, before you do,
okay,
because I want to expand on that a little bit.
Go for it.
What if we took that a step further and had maybe an episode or two, an episode or a 2-episode arc, where once he discovers the Ganma are ghosts, he actually becomes overly obsessive. And if we're going to keep some aspect of the Ganma not all being evil, maybe he kind of goes. Maybe that's where he goes a little xenophobic. He thinks all Ganma, regardless of faction, are all bad and need to be destroyed, and he gets a little obsessive with it.
And that is a good one, because then we can tie in some of Alan's arc to it later.
That's what
Alan-
I'm thinking too.
I know. I'm picking up what you're putting down.
I will add one thing when it comes to Onari in this. Cast your mind back to the overreactions that Hidari Shotaro had throughout Double. A lot of it is him he's quick on his feet, but he gets thrown off his game easy.
Yes.
I think it would be an interesting idea to tweak that, where Onari has this idea about how things are supposed to work, and when it comes to things that don't fit within how things are supposed to work, which kind of ties into that cleanliness thing, he overreacts. We
can have that. Yeah.
That works.
And
in the same vein, to go a bit further with that, I would, since you brought up him having some degree of spiritual power but not being able to take out whole Ganma, I would probably add on to that he has this pissing each other off rivalry with him and Yurusen.
Yes, absolutely. I can see that.
A Tom and Jerry like relationship.
But it should only be used sparingly.
Yeah,
sparingly.
Yeah, because again, the real issue with Onari was his comic relief aspects were used too often, and most of the time made him the butt of the joke. As we've discussed with our reconstruction of Legend of Korra, the reason Sokka worked and Bolin didn't was because Sokka was given his crowning moments of awesome, was allowed to be a character beyond the joke, and the joke was just incidental, whereas Bolin was the butt of every joke.
And I'm going to also throw in something else, because I've already been hinting at the idea that Akari will eventually start to come to accept the supernatural. Well, what if in turn she's the one that helps finally knock some sense into Onari and goes, dude, think logically here for a minute. Maybe some of these ghosts do want to move on, do want to do so, but something's holding them back. Instead of hating them, we should be helping them. Be the logical voice of reason in that idea and help pull him back.
An audience surrogate in a lot of work tends to be that. They tend to be the voice of reason. So that certainly fits.
And the final thing I have to add to Onari, because frankly, raising a kid that wasn't his by himself as a very young monk, among other things, is either going to make him an idiot, which we know he is not, or he's going to become very clever. I'm giving Onari just a little bit of trickiness and wittiness and cunning, mainly because bald characters who are monks tend to actually hide what they are behind a facade, and also because of the fact that his name Onari is very clearly close to Inari, the fox god of agriculture.
And one of the 7 lucky gods.
Yes, so I think Onari should actually be smart behind the facade of both the very solid Buddhist monk and slightly overreacting anti-ghost xenophobe. There's going to be cunning behind there, because that's how he's going to protect people when, well, Takeru or any of the other members of our trio are not around to destroy the Ganma. He's going to have to be clever. He's going to have to make sure that people are safe without being able to destroy Ganma.
Can I bounce on something off that? Like, maybe, like, I'm going with this with influences from, like, the Inari aspect. I would say, like, outside, like, they have a one-off episode where they see him walk out, and it turns out he helps or is someone, a high-ranking member of a local charity or something.
Well, I mean, if it's being a monk at a temple, he's already technically a high-ranking member of a local charity. Giving out a time where he goes out and gives out whatever donations or proceeds come to the temple to help the local area would be enough. But now, like I said, moving on to Edith. the Ganma general who pretends to be a sage to protect Takeru. First of all, I know we already said it. Takeru is not dying at the beginning of all this. He's not dying at all in all of this. Takeru does not need to die to give him motivation.
Mhm.
And with that aspect, Edith does not need to try and deceive him. In fact, like I said, the palace intrigue can be our driving, or at least our first apparent driving motivation. Remember that what you see is the first layer and not always the thing. Edith is stuck because he's a general. He's not part of the royal family, technically. I say technically because, well, that family is weird. Yeah, like he's a general, magistrate, and scientist. He's stuck between a power struggle and an ideological struggle for how the land of the dead should be managed in order to help and or use the dead, I guess would be the best way to put it. I'm sure that some part of the royal family just wants to use the dead as a power source, a source of strength and might. And
We
so
could do Alan's oldest brother to be that.
we'll get there. I'm just saying that these are the spitballed underpinnings.
Mhm.
Edith is going to be stuck, and he's going to see that because he's stuck and because the royal family can't make any decisions, the land of the dead is stagnating, it's dying, ironically. And because it's dying, now the dead are spilling over into the living. And that's the issue. That's why Ganma appear. Because the dead are spilling back over into the land of the living, and it's destroying the cycle. So
I would say in regard to that, this is where I'd shift a bit of a thing with the Ganma. Instead of them causing. Originally, the idea was they're causing despair, which is how you get your monster of the week. I would instead go with the idea that the Ganma being essentially kicked into the living world, and seeing that amount of life that ends up creating a kind of madness, and that is what ends up causing them to try and possess people and turning them into the monster of the week. The idea that they're stuck in a place that has this kind of wrongness. I guess if I were to use a parallel, consider how the ghosts in Jade Empire, because the pole of the shepherd, the water dragon, is no longer present, they end up going insane.
Yeah, I can see that.
You could also pull in an aspect from Final Fantasy X with the unsent.
Fiends.
Yeah, the unsent fiends. They are jealous of. They become jealous of the living, and that's what turns them in. And that's when they turn into that madness.
Mm-hmm. It is the same concept. The cycle is being, I won't say broken, but it's certainly being damaged, and and this is the result.
It's
Well,
like I said, it's causing things to spill over into the human world, and that's no good. The way I tend to see it is that what Edith would do is he would be looking for a human with a very specific spiritual build, and that's why he chooses Takeru. He looks around the human world looking for this person who fits whatever the idea that he's trying to fit is. And that happens to be Takeru. So instead of approaching Takeru because he's been attacked by Ganma and is quote unquote dead, not really, Edith just approaches him. Like, maybe after the Ganma have attacked and been repelled by both Takeru and Onari at one point. Both going, what the hell are those? And Edith approaches Takeru and says, hey kid, I can explain what's going on. It's not good, and I need your help.
Okay.
Because
I want to take that and run with it, because I think I can even set up the very first episode this way.
do it. Go for it.
All right.
I want to hear this.
So, Takeru and Onari are going through a walk through the forest. Let's keep that forest thing going here with that. And they're just Takeru's reminiscing about his father. They're talking about the past. When all of a sudden, Ganma comes out of nowhere and attacks them. And they've probably heard something about mysterious attacks at some point, but didn't know it had anything to do with this. So they go to fight this monster off, and all of a sudden, both of them because they're both Buddhist monks, they both have that spiritual power. They both fend them off, and Edith just happens to be nearby watching them. Because he's trying to figure out what to do. Then all of a sudden, he sees the two fighting off the Ganma, and more specifically, he sees that Takeru's doing a lot better at fending them off. Onari can do okay, but Takeru's actually causing damage. And that's when he approaches the two of them and explains the situation and says, we need help restoring the balance of life and death, and holds up the ghost driver. Takeru's a little hesitant at first, but now, let's go ahead and get that whole ghost thing out of the way now, and have Onari realize that immediately, and encourages Takeru to take it up.
Yeah, he'll using his mentor status, because he is at this point Takeru's surrogate guardian. He says, "This is something this is something the Buddha would want. This is something that is right to restore the natural cycle of the world. Because if people can't go through the cycles of rebirth, how are they ever going to reach enlightenment? How are they ever going to have that happiness?" Exactly. Which is of course, something that Takeru will latch to, that these people need to continue to go through the cycle to find their loved ones again and find happiness.
It's a perfect setup.
And so
I know some might go, why are we killing off the death thing and the 99 days thing? Because ultimately those things don't matter. And if you, in the greater story, and end up being forgotten. And if you want to still have those things of him going around as a ghost, there's a very easy answer for that. Especially given the background we're giving him. He's able to astral project.
Which is actually something that in Shintoism and in Buddhism is a thing that allegedly high-level spiritual monks and priests can do, is leave their body to observe the rest of the mortal world. If you still want the ghost shenanigans, it's Takeru sitting down, meditating, leaving his body, and seeing the rest of the mortal world. Yeah. Those shenanigans were ultimately not very impactful. There were a couple of times they were, but it wasn't so important that you have to keep it.
At most, let's be honest, at most they just led to a couple of interesting fights, but even then,
yeah, there are other ways to handle that.
Yeah.
The big thing here, though, is that first this makes it so that Edith is more involved at get-go, instead of just being this guy who shows up, gives him the mission, and sits on the sidelines. B, gets Edith immediately involved with the Daitenku Temple, and with, of course, all the shenanigans that go on there, so that we have more interaction with the core cast. And then C, it establishes the largest part of the stakes. That being, the cycle of death and rebirth is being obstructed, causing the dead to rise. Those are huge stakes.
Yeah.
Goes forever. The stakes of the entire fucking world are established from step 1.
Now, given that,
which I think is a little more important, just a little.
As far as the whole thing of the pursuit of icons, I would still have that be a important part.
Actually, I have already been thinking about how to recontextualize the icons to make it more, not only something that will carry it in the early parts, but potentially carry it through the entire series. The icons and the power they contain are are basically the central power of that cycle. Make it so that they are essential to both the heroes rebalancing the land of the dead, but also could be used by the Ganma, and more specifically our main villain, to take full control of the land of the dead.
Mm-hmm.
And stop the cycle forever using the energy of the dead to take over the world, essentially.
Exactly.
And-
My question to bounce off that then, would we still have them be the 15 individuals that represent them, or would we
Yes.
give them totally new?
Actually, no. We can still keep them as they are, because them being central historical figures, whether fictional or otherwise, that spiritual power, they are the epitomes of particular mindsets, ideals, and legacies that are like the maximum potential of the human spirit.
And
So you can still use those as the centerpiece.
now we've danced around it, but when it comes to Makoto, would you still keep him in, or would you have him written off? When it comes to Spectre.
I think Makoto is important story-wise as Spectre. I think him getting sidelined is not an indication of a bad character, but of bad character usage. What I was saying while you were away for a little bit before we started, Monk, Makoto needs to be given a more central position when he does show up, because he's Takeru's childhood friend. Him and his sister are like the closest people to him.
And there's an attempt to have a mystery box with the whole he disappeared 15 years ago.
I don't think we need that mystery box. I think instead of disappeared, they just moved away.
Fair.
And we don't need to try and force more intrigue into this story about the literal fate of life and death. There's already plenty intrigue there.
Mm-hmm.
So no, Makoto and what was her name? Kanon, I think her name was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
They moved away. Their dad had to go off to do something else, and it was a sad day.
Yeah.
It's one of the.
Here's my question on that, because I see where you're coming from. As somewhat of a parallel, are we going to have him be their father be a monk himself?
No,
Who moved
we
away?
don't need to do that.
Or would it be similar to Genta and Takeru and Shikenja in that aspect?
Where we have Takeru, who is basically raised in this environment. This is what he knows to an extent. Yeah, he'll go, but we have Makoto become the outsider of that.
We could certainly do that if we want to. The focus I'm looking on is the emotional impact to Takeru, because we've still established he's a sunshine boy, but he's a believable and relatable sunshine boy now, rather than the eternal sunshine boy that he was. Part of the reason his separation with Makoto and Kanon in this case is so tragic to him is it's because it's right after his dad died. His dad died. He had just lost his dad, and like a month later, Makoto and Kanon had to leave, and it's also what establishes his whole "you'll meet again" mentality, because it's going to be one of the first times Onari approached him when he was really young, because now Onari is his guardian, and goes, "Hey, remember, the cycle of death and rebirth isn't just about actual death and actual rebirth. It's about beginnings and ends, meetings and leavings. You will meet again at some point."
Oh, I just had a brilliant idea.
Let me hear it.
So, why does Makoto and Kanon suddenly show up? Their parents died tragically in an accident. Let's keep the mom in there too. Their parents died tragically in an accident, and unlike Takeru, who had someone to help them get over their father's death. Makoto and Kenon had nothing. They were left with next to only a little bit of inheritance to get them back to their hometown, and that's it. And they've been struggling. And that's created this cynical look at death. They hate the concept of death. That motivates them to get involved in this in their own way, and why they end up being somewhat antagonistic at the start to Takeru.
Mm-hmm.
I can see that. That works. That works really well. And especially Makoto's probably going to be like, how can you smile at a time like this, sort of thing.
Exactly.
And you know, it's gonna result in Takeru and Makoto coming to terms. And of course, Takeru's going to come to the terms with death of, yeah, death is not always going to be happy, but it doesn't always have to be tragic.
And
And
I would like to lean into a bit of a theming when it comes to the icons that they end up accessing.
okay,
With the icons that are associated with Ghost, they are because there's no reason we have to use the exact same set of icons as canon, but each of them are tied to each of Takeru's icons are tied to a person who achieved something monumental in some form, was recognized for some sort of, for lack of a better term, great work.
well, and I actually want to use the juxtaposition between Takeru using Musashi, the Musashi parka, versus Makoto using the Nobunaga parka.
Yeah, there seemed to be this idea of Spectre's icons being some sort of ruler, but unfortunately it was undone by one of his later ones being Houdini. But the idea, in this regard, the idea with the icons that Spectre has is that they are all some measure of ruler.
Well, I think we can distill it to again. I'm going to use the juxtaposition of Musashi to Nobunaga.
Mm-hmm.
We can distill it to a further focus. Takeru's icons, the ones he plays with, and I'm going to start with Musashi. These are people who achieved a great work through freedom and through exceeding themselves and exceeding, like, they're sparks of brilliance, I know, but in this case it really is brilliance that is the key there. Not brilliance that's the idea of smarts, brilliance as in they shine brightly as people.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas no mistake to anyone, nobody is ever going to mistake that Nobunaga did not create a great work, but his was very much a great work focused on power and consolidating power.
And let's not forget one of the other starting Ganma that Spectre had, Tutankhamun.
Yep. And Tutankhamun is the one most associated with the Curse of the Pharaohs, for one.
Mm-hmm.
But if we look at any pharaoh, though, any pharaoh was all about consolidating power. It didn't have to be Tutankhamun. They could have used Ramses or any of the others as well.
Yeah, I know in one of
the
the
most widespread, I believe.
I know in one of the movies, a icon of Alexander the Great shows up, but I'd give that one to Spectre to continue this theme.
Yeah, what I see it as is it's liberation versus a consolidation of power.
Mm-hmm.
All the damashi that Ghost gets are going to be these people who were liberated, were free thinking and free dealing, and achieved greatness through that freedom.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas all of the damashi that Spectre gets got it through achieved greatness through some sort of consolidation of power, which is why so many rulers would be involved, because rulers are by nature a consolidation of power.
Okay, I have a question then. If we want to go with that, we would have to. we would replace Houdini because that was, for all intents and purposes, his mid-season power up to an extent. What would you replace him with?
I don't think that the replacement would necessarily be super important about who it would be, just that the theme needs to be consistent. There are multiple different people who attempted to consolidate power. You could do Rasputin. Rasputin was attempting to destroy the entire Tsar line to consolidate power of Russia under himself. You could do any number
Timur?
of Indian rulers.
What about Timur?
You absolutely. You could do. I'm also trying to think of. I'm also trying to think of people outside of just ruling.
Which I can certainly get that. Part of me wanted to also say Vlad.
Yeah, you absolutely could see Vlad Dracul Tepish there.
Mm-hmm.
I think that would actually be the best one they could probably do.
I think Vlad Tepish would be the one that is used in the confrontation between the ultimate confrontation between Takeru and Makoto's ideologies before you get the whole fighting means friendship thing that is very common to Toku.
Yeah.
The whatever the replacement is, it needs to be someone who achieved greatness through a consolidation of power, whatever that was. And yes, I know, like we've said, rulers by nature, that's kind of their shtick, and so rulers are the easiest to come up with. But I'm going to be honest, I could make an argument that Joan of Arc achieved greatness through a consolidation of power. She was also half insane and a zealot.
Yeah.
Let's face it, that would be Kanon's, but I think we're getting on the
Would
rails.
you?
Yeah,
Would you in that same vein use someone like say just any of the founding fathers?
Okay, so if we're
That
going
one
to use any of the founding fathers for icons here, straight up, I'm going to just say it's going to be George Washington. And
George Washington was one of the ones they listed in the hundreds, so
yep.
he's already
And
in those.
George Washington would go to Makoto, despite the fact that George Washington is a very positive person and even rejected kingship because that's not what the United States was about. It would go to Makoto because he did achieve greatness through a consolidation of power. It's just a much more positive expression of that. And it could be seen that him getting George Washington is kind of like his change in mindset as well. When he gets George Washington, that's when he's like, maybe death isn't the end and it doesn't steal everything away from us after all.
Yeah. And I will note I know that both Makoto and Takeru get mid-season upgrades. One of them is Tokan Boost, the other one is Deep Spectre. I'd be far more willing to just have them be both referred to as Tokan Boost. Just one of them is red, the other one is blue. Going on the myth of the red and blue Oni.
Well, if we're gonna go like that, while I love the Tokan Boost idea, I hate the name. I'm gonna be honest.
Yeah.
The name is bad.
Mm-hmm.
The name is bad it's unimaginative. Like, I understand that Tokan is a word that literally means fighting spirit. I mean, but it's also technically a redundancy because the kon in Tokan is the same kanji as tamashi, which is soul.
Mm-hmm.
So they're basically saying fighting soul, boost soul, and it's dumb.
Yeah,
it's so dumb. If I had to call it something, and just because we already have this inspiration from a way that Takeru talks, he says, Inochi moyasuze, my life is burning bright. We just call it the burning soul. The burning soul, the burning damashi. Am I kind of evoking a little bit of G Gundam here? You better fucking believe it. But we've got Tomokazu Seki voicing the icons, so I don't think that's a problem.
Now continuing that theme, like when it comes to Elaine as Necrom, there's not a whole lot that we might recontextualize some things, but there's not a lot that would need to really be changed. It's more of someone who's seeing the other side of the fence when it comes to the matter of the cycle of life and death. And
the way I see it is Alan came over as essentially a general of an army. That's what Necrom was doing, commanding the Ganba, trying to fight the world. What we can see there is he did so at the didn't he do so at the behest of one of his other siblings?
I think it was.
I think
it was
Adel.
Yeah, I think it was his brother. Yeah.
And so at first, Alan's coming over at the behest of the brother he believes is right. The brother who says, "Well, we're the rulers of the world of death, and the world of the living should bow to us," and blah 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 blah. Whatever the motivation is. And Alan believes this because, hey, it's his brother. His brother's always been right ever since they've been kids. And when he comes over and gets his ass kicked repeatedly by Ghost and Spectre, I'm going to put it out there now. Spectre got sidelined way too often. Spectre should just get just as many really fucking cool fights, because otherwise Makoto being present has no real purpose beyond being, oh yeah, we're going to help flesh out Takeru. No, both characters need to be fleshed out.
Mm-hmm.
But as Alan gets his ass kicked more and more and doesn't understand why he's losing to these people of the living world, because he doesn't realize Edith has been helping them. He just thinks they got this on their own at first.
Mm-hmm.
He goes through that character arc where he learns how cool and good food tastes and stuff like that. That was honestly the cutest part when he started enjoying food.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I was just like,
obsession with takoyaki.
Yeah.
Now
Alan's obsession with takoyaki is it's so good. I love it.
It is. I love it. Now, the one change I would make, and it's a minor one, is that he doesn't have the Sanzo icon right away. And here's why. He starts, because those two icons, I was thinking about this whole time. Those two icons represent his growth throughout the series. He starts out with Grimm. And considering he's supposed to be a general for the Army of the Dead, it makes sense. You know, it's based on the Brothers Grimm. So having that kind of representation of death makes perfect sense for him in the early going. But he shouldn't have Sanzo right out the gate, because Sanzo and its connection to Journey to the West should represent the freedom he will later gain from his brother's control.
Yes, because Sanzo is just it's the Tong Monk. It is Xuanzong.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So have that be something he earns by breaking free and gaining his own freedom, his own individuality. Let that be that representation of that. In the original series, he had to basically get the blessing of the Sanzo icon to finally unleash its full power, but I think he should just have it earned outright and not have it in his possession the entire damn time.
I would say he has it, and he's still able to use it, but throughout it, he still feels certain aspects are being withheld, but he realizes the more he starts to enjoy, like, the other side, that the more he's gaining the blessing of it.
I'm gonna go one further. Okay. I want, if we're gonna do that he has to be accepted by the Tong Monk himself as part of getting the Sanzo icon. I want this to be like the epiphany Wukong receives at the end of the journey. I want that. I've been playing a lot of Monkey. Fuck you all. I don't care. I want some parallel here. I want Alan's journey to the west to parallel Wukong's enlightenment. So, at that point, the Sanzo icon would say things like, "You remind me of one of my greatest friends and pupils," and things like that.
No, I agree. No, and considering that a lot of the icons did that kind of thing, where they had to go through a journey representing their idealism to unlock their power. No, that makes perfect sense. I'm down with that.
Yeah.
Like, is it wrong of me that as one of the few times he comes to confront Takeru, either right after he switches sides or right before he finds that icon on the temple grounds and no one has found it in any way, shape, or form? Am I not the only one who just is seeing that and just wondering it would be very amusing? Like a fun sight gag?
Yeah. I know that the wheel was used as the primary weapon in that form, but if you're gonna be using a form that's rooted in Journey to the West, it's gotta be.
It's a fucking staff. It's a fucking staff. No one is gonna stop us from having the goddamn Jingu Bong. Fuck you.
I mean, hell, years later we'd get a Sayuki-based form in Kamen Rider Saber that is using a staff.
Yep.
But the big thing here is that most of Alan's journey can remain the same in what he learns, what he does. It's just that contextually, it now needs to fit in with Takeru and Makoto, and that's actually pretty easy. I know that his super form was called Yojo Boost or Friendship Boost because of how he had learned to connect to people. We could still just call it the burning soul icon, or the burning spirit icon. It's just that his burning spirit is in conjunction with others. Their burning spirits every one of their burning spirits are in conjunction with their own ideals, and that's how it manifests. So when he gets his green Oni, which isn't a thing, but funny, haha. Gets a super form. It's all because he's learned to accept what being a living thing is like. Learned to accept that the cycle of life and death is important, and learned to accept that people need to work together no matter where they are, living or dead. So, yeah.
Yeah.
If anyone can't tell, Alan's probably still the best character of the show.
Yeah. Now,
we can't really do much about that any other way.
That being said, I would still have Adel be the ultimate big bad in this kind of situation.
Absolutely.
It is more that the big reason for the palace intrigue is the disagreement on direction on where things are supposed to go for the future of the Ganma. And to keep that, you have different directions. The Emperor wants to maintain things as they are. Igor just wants to be able to do his science shit without restraint, basically making him a hojo. And Adel is very much in that people in the living world have been misusing the gift of life and need to be taught how to use it proper. I.e., that's his pretense for invading the living world.
Yeah.
And of course, the gradual realization that Adel is a few eggs short of a damn picnic.
Yeah, and is also the one primarily employing who you called Igor. You meant Danton.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And like he Danton was a weird character that was not very good in a movie. Not very good at all.
Mhm. Now, when it comes to the concept of grateful, I'd be fine with keeping that. But I probably want to have that as the stepping stone to eventually infinity, much in the whole burning and shining approach.
Yeah.
In other words, as powerful as say grateful is, it's incomplete.
Yeah. It's not yet Mugen.
Mm-hmm. And I would also say, I know that they had that big CG monster at the end. I would kill that. I would not use that and have the focus on Adel being the quote unquote final boss, because a big CG monster as your final boss in a story is always going to feel underwhelming.
Underwhelming and disappointing.
That's the reason why it doesn't work out in so many of those really bad Hollywood movies that have the big CG monster in Act 3.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's not the opponent that you've been watching up until that point.
Exactly. You can have him kill something like that as like a part of the journey to get to Adele.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Like some of the wars we've seen happen before you get into the final boss's chambers.
Yeah. But I do ultimately think that when it comes to the way that it plays out, it should be by the end of it, the barriers are the barrier between the world of Ganma and the world of the living is reestablished using the icons. But I'd say in regards to it, Elaine decides to not go back to his world and instead make a new life for himself in the world of the living.
Which would make sense. He would be the bridge.
Mm-hmm.
Alan has bridged both worlds and understands them.
Yeah.
And Takeru wouldn't want to necessarily be that bridge, as is implied by him being Mugen in the end. Because the implication of the Mugen icon initially was, oh, he's accepting the infinity of both worlds. Well, now that both worlds are not an alien world and Earth, but actually the worlds of life and death, Takeru understands, being a good practicing Buddhist, that death will come for him when it comes for him, and he will move into that part of the cycle when he is supposed to. No earlier, no later. He will join the cycle on that step when it is best for him to do so. Whereas Alan, who understands that being part of the rulers of the dead, he's technically immortal and isn't part of the cycle. Because for those who do not understand Buddhist reincarnation and the idea of the Buddhist afterlife, because there is an afterlife, there's technically hells for anybody who has sinned too much. Their dharma is bad. They get put through those hells until their souls are purified enough to put back into the cycle. And this comes all the way back from not just Zen Buddhism, but Chan Buddhism, all the way back in China.
Mm-hmm.
There are rulers of these hells. That's what these rulers of the afterlife do. They judge the soul to see if the soul needs cleansing, cleanse it if it needs to do so, and then puts it back into the cycle. If not, it helps the soul lose all of the trappings of its previous life and then puts it immediately back in the cycle. This is usually done by doing something to make them forget the trappings of their past life, most generally drinking the soup of a grandmother on a bridge that makes you forget your previous life.
In
So
that regard, I'd like to propose something. I already mentioned Elaine choosing to stay in the living world as he's crossed that particular threshold.
Yeah.
Would you have that reversed with Makoto? He ends up spending more time in the Gamma world and getting a bigger perspective.
I think Makoto would spend some time in the Gamma world, maybe even take some time to see if his, because this isn't exactly Buddhist hell, so nobody's being tortured or whatnot, but they're still being processed so that they can move on in the cycle of reincarnation. I think Makoto would stay there along with Kamen just to see that their mother and father, from a distance, they're obviously not going to go interfere, but to see their mother and father are doing well, and then to get more perspective on death itself before eventually returning.
Yeah.
I think Alan, because again, he's part of the ruling class of this place and is thus technically an actual immortal because he's meant to administer. Part of the reason he's staying in the world of the living is to get a better understanding of what those in the world of the living need. And as such, is basically now next in line for the throne when his father Adonis finally abdicates. Because we're now talking about after the ending, after Adele has been defeated.
Yeah.
So he takes the time to interact with Takeru, interact with Onari. He still has somewhat of a. It's the type of friendship you have, Monk, where we fuck with each other, but we're still friends. Yeah. Phrasing, I know. But he has that type of friendship with Onari, and Onari, of course, is a little more mellowed out. He understands that he can't. That there are ghosts who need help, rather than just ghosts that need to be sent without anything more than a fuck you and some exorcisms. But he also understands that now he can discern between those because not only has Takeru been doing that the entire time, he's been helping. So he's got a broader mind.
Also,
go ahead.
I want to throw in an additional thing for Alan that might help add to that idea of him wanting to understand the human world and the process of life. And it's through a character that he interacts with quite a lot. And YGM brought her up earlier, Grandma Fumi. Have her die of old age. Have her pass on through old age. Nothing tragic, nothing sad. Just have her reach the end of her life cycle and have her finally decide to move on and have him see that she goes on with a smile on her face, and that helps him understand that life is like, even in death there could be happiness, and that helps him change his perspective on things.
Absolutely. The biggest thing here is that all these people are learning new stuff.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think, and that's the thing about all sorts, but this one, keeping everything in tone with aspects of life and death, works.
But
yeah, well, and remember that Fumi does die in the actual show. When they have the battle in Deep Connect, and Alan wants to get her, drawing materials so that she can draw, and she had passed away. So we really aren't changing anything there.
No, but I think in this case we're tweaking it so that he witnesses it. And you know what? Let's really make this good. Let's throw Makoto in there.
Okay.
Because by him seeing Fumi pass on with a smile on her face, it helps him understand that not all death is bad.
I actually want to go one step further with this. John, just give me one.
Okay.
Alan understands it inherently because he's been hanging around with Fumi the entire time. He understands she's fulfilled, and that's why she's smiling. Makoto, seeing this, it has the same knee-jerk reaction he has to Takeru smiling about some people dying. Like, how can you smile at a time like this? And it's Alan who has to go, and this is big because Alan and Makoto don't get along a lot in the show. And I imagine probably wouldn't get along a lot in ours until this moment. He goes, no. She's had a long life. She's fulfilled by what she's done. Even if there are things she had wished she had done, she knows she did what she could. She's letting it all go herself. Why can't you let it go?
I like that.
Because, well, for one, it shows how far Alan has come. The fact that he can voice it so easily. And for another, it's going to punch Makoto in the head. Because this isn't Takeru saying it. Someone he already knows, appreciates, respects, and kind of sometimes disregards. Because he's like, Takeru's always been this sunshine boy. Of course he sees death in a positive light. When it comes from Alan, this guy who was an enemy general, was discouraged when he was forced to become human, and then learned the joys of life, it's a much bigger punch in the head because, wait a minute, is this the same fucking guy I fought and have been fighting with kind of the entire time? What the hell is wrong? It's going to be a slap. It's going to be a big old slap of reality to Makoto.
It's gonna be like, wait, have I been the asshole this whole time?
Wait a minute, are we the baddies?
Exactly.
Wait,
Yeah.
I'm bad? No, that can't be.
Yep.
I mean,
And then, of course, this also will lead to Makoto being a little accepting of Alan and Canon, because I'm keeping that. That was cute.
Yeah. But now I know some might go, well, what are you when it comes to the other movies and specials, how would you adapt those? And it's like with a lot of them they can get tossed simply because I am more in favor of making a self-contained story that you can add little bits and pieces there, but it's not required to add those things in. And that includes things like Spectre v Cinema, which is a complete mess.
That is getting more of it. I don't care what anyone says.
Yeah.
We don't talk about things that no longer exist because we've changed the entire story.
Yeah.
If you as far as doing a follow up about Spectre, I could see that being done, but it'd be more of a post series one that's going into his change in perspective, spending time in the Ganma world, and
yeah. And if it's like most V cinema, the lesson he learns drives him to protect it, even though he hates death, or even though he thought he hated death.
And one thing that I think they didn't establish, though it became a principal part of his power set, is the fact that Sin Spectre is an embodiment of the 7 deadly sins. Make that a core aspect of the story, and one of the things he learns is that by managing the sins, you can manage your life. So him being someone who embodies those sins basically says, yeah, the sins are bad, but by controlling them, you can make your life better.
Like, the sins are an everyday part of our life. There's nothing we can do about that. It's how you manage them.
Exactly.
Yeah. No, I can absolutely see that. And again, this is all... I mean, Sin Spectre was already supposed to be the opposite, the opposite equal to Mugen. Mugen Ghost.
Yeah.
In the end, we have Sin Spectre, we have Mugen Ghost, we have Wukong Necrom. I'm going to call it Wukong Necrom, and you can't stop me.
I'm not going to.
I wasn't necessarily talking about you guys specifically, just the world as a whole.
Everybody else, yeah.
Yeah.
I was going to say, is there really anything we can't do with you?
You could try to stop me to do things. The only way you're going to do it is have Monk kick me out of the call.
I'm not doing that.
I know, you like to see other people suffer.
If you have to suffer, so does everybody else.
Exactly.
I was going to say, it's like, while we're suffering, if there was one, you would be posting Garu with the popcorn bucket emojis all over the place.
But
that would work.
I think one of the key things we're looking at here is that all 3 of our main heroes embody a different aspect of life and death. Takeru is the sun. We call him the Sunshine Boy. He is the bright side of life. He is someone who understands that life is bright, it's full of potential, it's infinite. That's why he is the sun. And Makoto, he's the opposite. He is the darkness.
The moon.
He understands the dark side of death. And he comes to embody that, especially in the V Cinema where he becomes Sen Spectre. He is the darkness. Whereas Alan, he's not just the balance between the two. He is, he is, I guess you could say Makoto is the dark side of life. The sins, the darkness, and everything like that. But shows that the darkness isn't inherently evil. Alan is the embodiment of death. Both the control it has, and then later the freedom it offers.
Mm-hmm.
The freedom to reincarnate, to live again, everything like that. So all three of them have an aspect of life and death in them that makes it a great combination.
Yes, absolutely. I was also going to when you started with the sun, and then Monk was like, and Makoto is the moon. I was going to say that makes Alan the Bridge of Stars during Tanabata.
There you go. There you go.
It wouldn't be the first time that Kamen Rider has
OST.
referenced Tanabata.
The last time either. Tanabata episodes are a dime a dozen of Toku.
Yeah, I'm just saying we had it very blatantly with Zeronos.
No, I didn't know that at all. But no, the big thing is that they all, because they all, and the big thing is they all initially embody an aspect to an extreme that isn't necessarily good. Like, Takeru does eventually learn that, yeah, he is looking at the positive side, but it's kind of to try and block away the negative stuff. As he grows, Takeru comes to accept that the negative happens, but that the positive outpowers it. Whereas with Makoto, he only has ever been focusing on the negative. But then he learns the negative is there, we can manage it, we can keep it at a controlled level, and then the sun shines bright again. And then Alan just learns life and death are, like, initially it was just, well, we're the world of the dead. We are very important. That he learns that both life and death are important. And that with one without the other is just folly. It would cause the universe to crumble.
Yes.
And so they become more balanced versions of themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Which I might add that just once again ties into the Buddhism aspect of the show. Thank you.
Yeah.
And in fact, Onadi, I would want Onadi to say something right after we get Mugen form, because Mugen form is going to be where the acceptance of bad happens, but the good still shines through. That Takeru comes into. It's going to be Onadi coming up and being like, I never knew how to tell you that while, yes, you got the lesson I gave you after your dad died and after Makoto and Kanon had to leave, that you'll need each other again. I never knew how to tell you that you still have to accept that sadness. You still have to feel that, accept it, process it, and then let it go. As part of the path to enlightenment, you do have to experience the mortal dust, all of it. Just always be positive. And now that I see that you couldn't make me prouder, Takeru. You could not make me prouder. Which might go to making Takeru feel really, really choked up because, well, Onadi's been his substitute dad for the last, 13, 14 years.
Mm-hmm.
And less than that, like 10 years. I think his dad died when he was 7?
Yeah.
Something like that.
But
I feel like that little jab is necessary because we want Onadi to be a serious character when he needs to be a serious character, and 2, Onadi is substitute dad, and substitute dad still needs to be a dad.
And something that I do want to hammer home is because I know that they were trying to go for a lighter approach, and this is something that I think is going to be the coda. It is better to have moments of lightness and moments of seriousness than to build your writing around something being lighthearted unless you're expressly trying to write a gag comedy. And Toku certainly has its fair share of gags, but it is not the equivalent of a gag manga. If anything, that stereotype of gag manga has been something that, like, manga has been trying to get away from since the 70s.
I mean, depending. Again, Gintama.
Hmm.
Remember that Gintama is such a gag comedy / anime that the anime has an opening, I believe it's the 23rd episode, where they fail the opening and comment on how they failed the opening.
I remember.
I've seen that clip. I saw that floating around on Twitter the other day.
I fucking love Gintama. Once again, Sugita is our boy.
Hell yeah.
Oh yeah.
That is his biggest role ever.
Yeah, Gintoki, definitely.
Yeah.
Well, for me, we all know it's a different one for me.
But
I'm not
True.
saying everyone has their favorites. I'm saying that's the one that anyone who really knows Sugita's work knows that's his big one.
Yep.
But with all that in mind, I think we've covered everything that we can cover when it comes to this reconstruction, and managed to make it in a way that is not going to be as frustrating. But
it's more bearable.
Now, with that said, I think that's where we'll wrap it up for this particular episode of GeekWatch. We will not be doing GeekWatch next week because I'm going to be doing something a little different. There has been a particular game that I demoed a few weeks back, called Mecha Simultactics, which is meant to be exactly what it sounds like, a simultaneous tactical mecha game.
It's a turn-based PvP tactical game.
Yeah. A recent update has allowed for more private lobbies when it comes to that game. So next week we're going to be testing that out and seeing how much chaos we can end up causing because of the approach that it has. It is there's not a whole lot of parallels I can make when it comes to this sort of simultaneous turn-based that it's going with. So
It's
it'll
very
be
interesting.
interesting. Yeah, and I covered it in one of the demo grab bags. Speaking of which, I will be back later tonight with another demo grab bag because a bunch of stuff that I've covered in the past has gotten demos and I want to showcase it. But that is a story for another time. So until then, on behalf of the good brothers present and not present, my name is Mildra. I am your gaming monk. And join the watch.
Here, leave.